Hello and welcome. If you are at the Fireside Chat for consultants, then you are in the right place. I am happy. My name is Holliday, and I am the Chief Strategist for Holliday Advisors, CEO and Chief Strategist at Holliday Advisors. We do diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies pretty exclusively for progressive institutions and the Democrats. I am joined by two of my favorite people in the movement, Renee Redwood and Neil Carter. Renee and I have been business partners and go back a long way. Renee, please introduce yourself. I think you need to make sure you're off mute. You're not off mute yet. Okay, there you
Okay, there you go. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Renee Redwood, and it's a pleasure to be here with you to share some of the lessons learned, and listen to what you all have to say with regard to being able to conduct business with Democratic Party institutions. So we're here to be of support and help.
Whoops. I'm on mute now. And I'd like to welcome Neil Carter as well. Neil, please introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neil Carter. I am the principal of New View Consulting, the only Black and disabled owned general consulting firm in the country. We've been around for about 17 plus years now. Also, the founder of the Black Consultant Group, the largest Black consultant membership organization in the world.
Awesome, awesome. So as you can see, between Renee and Neil and myself, we are not new to this. We are true to this, and I think one of the joint passions that we share is not only are we interested in continuing to advance our own businesses, but we recognize the importance of helping. Consultants and particularly consultants of color break into this industry if that's where you at, expand your business within this industry if that's where you're at, or perfect your craft if that's where you're at. And so today is really just a conversation on how we can provide some things that we've learned along the way to accelerate, enhance, and expand your business. And particularly in working with progressives and the party. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to start with Neil because Neil, I know you're going to have to leave us a little bit soon. So I want to get some of your stuff in early. How in the world did you get started as a political consultant? What was your first job and how'd you get it? As a
As a,
consultant, your
as
first
a consultant.
contract, and how did you get it?
So that was in 2002. Was working for a state was working for a state ledge race here where I live in Maryland. Had the opportunity to assist with the Maryland House Caucus, um, and some of the delegates running for reelection then, and that was the first statewide contract or state level contract, and then 2 years later, obviously, was a presidential cycle. So we had the opportunity to work for one of the many um, uh, presidential campaigns in that primary that then moved on to the general. Um, and that was an exciting time because that rolled over 4 years later and gave us the opportunity to work for another presidential campaign in 2008. Now, between 2004 and 2008, had the opportunity to work for several campaigns in between then. Um, but that really, and we haven't really worked on any haven't had any presidential campaigns since then. Not to say I wouldn't take any on, but none. But after you get those two presidential cycles under your belt, you don't really want to work on presidential campaigns and have them as a client, particularly for the two presidential campaigns that we had as clients back then. Um, so it's one of those kinds of things where we just wanted to focus on like campaigns at the lower tier of the ballot, and
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the top. While we've worked on plenty and had plenty clients who were at the top of the ballot across the country, statewide campaigns, it's really the down ballot races that have been exciting. The ones that are nail biters, the ones that are we had a campaign very exclusively in 2006 that was a, a House race, and it was for a state legislator, and it was and it ended up being down to 200 votes
Yeah.
that separated the candidate that was our client versus the candidate that we beat, um,
Mm-hmm.
and that was exciting. That was
Yeah.
exciting.
So one of the things that I'm hearing you say and that bring up, Neil, which is so important, is first, relationships are important, and one campaign leads to the next campaign, leads to the next campaign, and that there actually is a through line between the work that you get from the work that you're doing now to your next body of work. And the other thing that I hear you saying, which I think is so critical, is to that the more you do, the more you figure out, where your specialty is, where your sweet spot is. And so sometimes you take on campaigns for the experience, but it helps you to refine what your work ultimately becomes, so it evolves over time. Thank you so much for that. Renee, I have to ask you the same question. What was your first political client, and how did that come about?
Meaning they were for my services as a company. And I started my business in 2003. And the first paying target client was in 2018. Now I have been engaged as a consultant, but I had never had party structure as a client. I had been within the party. I had been the director of local operations at the Democratic National Party, so I was employed by the party. So I've been that perspective of the kind of internal operations and just external expression of campaign. And so part of that work was around diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Community outreach, targeting. So all of that, the operational aspects, how you run a business, how you run the campaign, why the structure is important, understanding responsibilities, budgets. So just the operations aspect internally allowed to bring a different perspective to the work and the opportunities that could be availed at the party structure. We had always done work with maybe other progressive organizations and other suppliers or businesses like consultants. So I see my computer's causing some sound challenge. So let me go back on mute and figure it out.
We are having just a bit of sound challenges with you. I apologize for that. Because we know you have a lot to say. Lord knows I learn from you every day. But one of the things I want to pull out, that you were talking about is, how you're showing up for clients, and the importance of that. I want to remind you all, this is a fireside chat. So we are here to offer thoughts and guidance, but we're also here to answer questions. So if you don't, you can feel free to put questions in the chat here. We'll do our best to try to address them. I, of course, have lots of questions because I'm just a naturally curious person, and want to make sure that we're sharing some of the insight of the work that we're doing. So please feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll be attentive to that. We also have Tim, who's our tech moderator, who's helping us make sure that we don't miss anything from you. We'd love for this to be as interactive as possible. I'm going to go back to Neil while we work on Renee's sound issues, and we'll come back to her. So, Neil, there's so much opportunity now, not just in politics, but just in progressive world as well. What advice do you give to people to sort of prepare themselves to be able to take advantage of some of these opportunities? It feels like you could almost do anything, and Lord knows everybody's looking for consultants of color, it feels like. How do we prepare ourselves for this moment to take advantage of it?
I mean, I think I think the easy answer is finding like-minded consultants that share probably lived experience. I unfortunately, and probably you as well, Holly, um, uh, when I had started my firm, I didn't really have a mentor to kind of lean on that looked like me that I could say, yes, were there black consultants when I started my firm? Sure. Were there black male consultants when I started my firm? Obviously. Were there white male consultants? Plenty. And there still are. But there wasn't really anyone I could kind of lean on and kind of look to for support, for guidance. Um, and now I think that's different. Now we're in a climate where, yes, is there still, particularly after the 2016 cycle, there is plenty of um, uh, distrust in what people think is the consultant class from a lot of the failed um, uh, presidential campaigns from 2016 on, and really, and that's because Twitter, social media is an echo chamber. So when people see consultant, they see the people who are end up being analysts on CNN or MSNBC or things like that, and they assume that those folks are the only consultants that exist in the consultant space. When in actuality, that's not the case. Um, there are consultants that provide a multitude of different services. Obviously, my firm and Holli's has some services that are similar, but most of them are not the same. But we are able to work together and find coercion and work together to complete tasks and put in bids with particular clients or democratic organizations or progressive organizations together. And really what it's about for me is finding, don't just, I think with the consultant class, people assume that, oh, I'm just going to create a firm and then the clients are just going to come. That's not the case.
I wish that was the case.
I wish.
Lord,
I
I
wish. I
want
wish.
that firm. I want the firm where you just put the shingle out, open your social media page, and in flood the clients.
Um, obviously that's not the case. I think it's going to be easy for uh, individuals to assume that because, again, there are a lot of uh, consultants
Yeah.
that uh, portray this image, frankly, of uh, kind of an access um, to clientele.
Yeah.
And that's really for me, that's been the issue for a number of years. Holly, I don't know about you, but I still to this day cold call and cold email clients off of Board of Elections websites when they file. Um,
Sometimes.
I mean, particularly as it relates to electoral work.
Yeah.
Obviously, with relationships with certain committees and certain policy organizations, yes, you can email the executive director and say, add me to your directory of consultants when you roll out RFPs. And you can certainly inquire about that. But if your firm doesn't have a website, if your firm isn't registered and you aren't paying taxes, and all you have is a LinkedIn page and um, uh, you know, uh, one either a Facebook page or you're using your personal email as your business account, there are certain things that particularly democratic organizations look for when they are um, inquiring about your business, that they are going to be less likely, frankly, to provide your firm business if you are using your personal email instead of a business branded one.
That's right.
Um,
That's a good point. And that actually gets to William's question in the chat, which is, and welcome back, Renee. Can we, how's your mic?
Exclusion is exclusion. You're seeking
Listen,
to be
we can hear
included
you.
and
Love
you can
it.
hear me.
Welcome to the conversation. It's
Oh,
so much
thank you for
better.
welcoming me.
Yes,
Yes,
well,
yes,
listen,
and
I'm going
yes.
to come
I'll
back with
just,
William's question,
yep.
and he says that this is a perfect, ironic segue. But he says he's been out for a cycle to take time with the family, and now he's coming back in. What are some of those pathways to get reconnected? And Neil, I think you hit upon one really important one, and that is reach out to your contacts and reach out to those people as they are getting in the race. We're at the moment now for me, especially when you look at state races. National races work a little bit differently, but if you think about the state and local races that are about to happen, this is the election season of all election seasons. It's not the biggest, but it's like the playoffs going into the midterm, and we're going to have a lot of city, state, county, school board, statewide, national elections happening, and you can monitor when people file and give them a call, because chances are, especially if they're first time candidates, they don't have a team. They not bought into a consultant yet, and that could be an opportunity for you to really advance a quality candidate by just connecting them with quality skills and services. Renee, what do you think?
Well, I want to go back to the employer ID number versus the social security number.
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
yeah, I always talk about structuring for success. And part of being able to be successful as a business is to be a business. And a couple of things. Number one, it's important to separate your individual assets from your corporate public assets, just functionally, and for risk.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like what you give them information, and many of us are consultants. We like to give what? Advice. They don't like your advice. You do not want them going after your home if you have a home or your car or your bank account. So if nothing else, just safety first and smart. So that's an important first step, and encourage people to do so ASAP.
Yeah.
I love the point on your email. That's your identity. So it's either you at Gmail. So you work with Gmail, or do you work with your company? Okay,
Yeah.
branding. Okay, you get one chance to make a first impression. So you're either marketing Gmail or at me.com. Maybe that's okay, me.com. But again, is that linking up to your ability to generate revenue and create a contractual relationship to secure resources?
Yeah.
So I
So
just
I'm hearing you
back to that one.
say, in order to be in business, you need to be a business and
Absolutely.
not present yourself as a hobby, because these things really do impact people's real lives, and
Hmm.
they want to work with professionals. So it's important for you to present yourself as a professional.
And as an institution to institution, it creates a very different relationship, and it's a very different power dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, while you were away, Neil mentioned his journey into the political consultant space and mentioned not having a mentor. And William asked the question how to link up with a mentor. And I just want to share, since Renee happens to be one of my mentors, although she constantly denies me, I have to tell you. But really, Renee, I will let you speak, I promise. Renee was one of my early mentors because I am obviously, maybe not obviously, a Black woman from Missouri, trying to be in politics. And there weren't a lot of Black women or Black people, period, making a living in politics where I started doing politics in the great state of Missouri. And so meeting women like Renee and really imposing myself upon her was really helpful in helping me to understand how I could be successful as a consultant. And I'll be honest, my relationship with Renee started because I hired her to help me do work when I was working in a nonprofit executive position. But she was very instrumental in helping me to start my political consulting firm in 2010. Things like she shared about making sure you are a real business and not just, out here as just a Gmail. It feels more casual. Institutionalize yourself. Put some of those guide rails in place. So I think some of what hooking up with a mentor is again creating that relationship and reaching out to people for advice when you need it. What you might find is, which I have now, is a whole kitchen cabinet of people that I reach out to for advice. So all the pressure is no longer on just Renee to help me out when I'm messing it up. I have a whole kitchen cabinet. So I'll go to Renee and then Neil, your same question.
Okay, let me just do my first rebuttal. Number one, I did not reject her as a mentee. I said that at some point and throughout the relationship roles change, right? And that's part of that. And so I find her to be my mentor. And I said we transitioned to a new point because we can learn from each other. And part of that goes into what we call as a collaborative business model. So for folks who may not have their businesses established at this point, you may want to look in how do you collaborate, not only as a business, but with others who are businesses and businesses of color, who are doing the work in politics, that you can come in as a subcontractor. All right, so that's another way in which to get it. And I hear I'm having voice issues again. That might be a message from God, Holli.
And Neil, what about you? What about now? Do you have mentors in your life? How did you get them, and how do you use them?
So I don't necessarily have mentors in the work that I do in political
Hmm.
consulting. I have life mentors that are great that I had when I was growing up, um, uh, but not related to my work. And that's not to say that they don't exist. I do have people in my life that have been uh, in business longer than I have that I do
Hmm.
confide in,
Hmm.
particularly now that we have membership organizations like the Black Consultant Group. And I am grateful to have folks who have been in business uh, more for years and decades longer than me, and folks like myself who can be mentors for the people who are just starting. Um, one of my good friends announced her business several days ago, and she used to work for a former U.S. senator. And I'm happy that she started her business. I'm excited for her, and uh, having a certain but I will also add, and I'm sure Renee and you, Holly, will agree as well. Um, Having years of experience in consulting doesn't necessarily mean that you should be in a capacity. And I know this may be counterculture to the question, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah,
Having those years of experience doesn't necessarily always mean that you are in a capacity to mentor someone else as it relates to their business,
yeah,
particularly because a lot of people assume, oh, I've been in business for X amount of years, but if you don't have the relationships with the committees, if you don't know, if you don't have relationships with, you know, certain Democratic clubs, or if you aren't, or if you are known only in your region and you aren't known outside, if you aren't known as a national brand, um, then it's going to be hard pressed for you to be able to mentor someone who is trying to be a national firm, and
yeah,
you in a mentor capacity are only known in your region.
yeah,
That's not to say that people in their region can't be mentors, but that is to shine a light on being realistic on what it
hmm
means to be a mentor. Um,
yeah. What are some of the unique? I think that's right, and I think you have to sort of understand. what your mentor can and cannot do for you. So I think I think that is a realistic perspective. So we are all consultants of color. So one thing that's being asked is like, what are some of how do we navigate coming in as a person of color? What are some of the challenges that we've had to overcome being a person of color working in politics? And even today, as we acknowledge that the opportunities for consultants of color has never been higher, let's be clear, we're still kind of working, not even kind of, we're still working in a white man's construct. And they're still getting the larger contracts and making most of the money, even though there is greater opportunity. So, how is that? Neil, I'll start with you and then Renee.
Sure. So I'll say, uh, to put it plainly, I'll answer it two ways. First, obviously, as you said, Holly, there are a number of folks who are in this space, um, who are not POC, who are white or white passing, that have more opportunities presented to them as consultants than than us, their POC counterparts. And then conversely, there are a lot of POC consultants who try to operate in multiple spaces at once, and because they see that their white counterparts are doing the exact same thing, and they're seeing them succeed, so they're like, "Oh, I can be a jack or Jill of all trades too. I can provide fundraising and GC and branding and DEI and coaching and mentoring." And it's just like, wait a second, you're
We're
overextending
all
yourself.
laughing because we've all been there and seen
Yeah,
it.
exactly. Um, and don't get me wrong, I know that a lot of those folks who have multiple services, some of them conflicting, some of them not, try to operate, and suggesting that they have the capacity to um, provide all of these services. But I think the proof is in the pudding, and
Mhm.
it's obvious that operating as a jack or Jill of all trades really can only stretch you out and really burn you out at a relatively quick pace. So, my
Mhm.
suggestion in terms of operating, if you are a person of color trying to either have an existing firm or you are thinking of starting one up, my recommendation would be um, providing yourself, being honest with the services you can provide, um, and also not, you know obviously the old adage is, shoot for the moon and you'll hit the stars. um, and I certainly believe that, but I also want to set some reality in that statement too, and that reality is, if you are providing so many services, as I said before, you're not only going to stretch yourself thin, but you're also going to burn yourself out very
Mhm.
quickly.
Yeah.
So just be mindful of the services you are providing. Think about the opportunities. Connect with folks like Renee, Holly, and myself, and others. There are many organizations, not just the Black Consultant Group, but there's also the NADC. There's the Justice League in New York, that's based out of New York. And there are several membership organizations that you can join. I mean, there's all kinds of directories. Obviously, Campaigns and Elections has one. Um, and then obviously the AAPC is probably the largest and most well known. Um, uh, but just being but and I will also say, take into consideration that being a part of consider the membership organization that you are considering joining, because in a lot of cases, some of the membership organizations you are joining, particularly if you are a POC consultant, and Holly has heard me use this adage before, and Renee, this is the first time you're hearing it, but some of these membership organizations, particularly if you're a POC consultant, you are a peppercorn in a giant salt shaker. And if you want to operate in that capacity, by all means go ahead and do that. But know that you will not succeed, because we all know that being a peppercorn in a salt shaker, you're not going to make it out of that salt shaker. So you're not going to be able to connect with clients, and we already know how saturated the um, the consultant class is with we like we know how white and male dominated the consultant class already is. So think about that before you join a membership organization where the leadership and a majority of the membership is that. Join
Yeah.
join the membership organizations that are going to be true to your lived experience, that can provide opportunities and services that can benefit you in the long term, and you're just not a number or a name on a website.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What about you, Renee? How are you navigating being a person of color in this space?
Recognizing so much of what has already been stated, number one. Number two, going back to the business, right? And the notion that how do I adapt my business practices as a company to recognize sometimes the limitation of the market directly, which is why I said it was with the Democratic Party institutions, but I had done work with many of the other organizations that the party
Mm-hmm.
relies on
Yeah.
as a critical way in which I got into the Democratic Party operations as a business.
Yeah.
And so that you can provide these services to other enterprises. Again, the party has a network of
Mm-hmm.
critical stakeholders and to some degree, if you're thinking nonprofits, to some degree, those are vendors,
Yeah.
right? Because they're
Yeah.
the ones connecting party to community, right?
Yeah.
So some of those are other opportunities that present themselves for individuals seeking to
Yeah.
do this work
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
space.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there, Renee, especially around and the next question is really gets at this um in terms of the idea of do you have is there one path? Like do you have to come out of an advocacy group or do you have to come out of a main Democratic committee? I would say no, you don't have to, but what that affords you is relationships. And so, if you're not coming out of an advocacy group where you're doing this work, or you're not coming out of a Democratic committee, what you have to do, or your challenge is, you have to figure out how to form those relationships because those people, groups, institution, organizations typically will be your client. And I actually want to get back to something that you hit upon, Neil, in terms of when you're getting started, how you figure out and market your services. And I would say, I had a great business coach who wasn't political at all, but this really helped me to define my business. And it was who's your ideal client? Who do you want to work with and what kind of services do you want to provide to them? And while you may
And
feel
at what
like
price point?
yes, Renee, good point. At what
And at
price
what price
point? Because that's going to make a difference because your price point might be bigger than some of the smaller groups can afford or some of the smaller campaigns. But I think when you figure that out and you play to that client, you'll find that other clients want to work with you. In the last, I've been in business since I've been in political consulting since 2010. I certainly have done everything in politics from volunteer to manager to consultant to even running institutional campaigns where we run and endorse 100 campaigns at a time. And I found where I am the most successful is when I am very clear and very specific about what I can do well and the value that I'm adding to the campaign. And if you think about your services as a value add proposition, it becomes much easier for you to market them and clearer for your potential clients to understand exactly what they're getting rather than, just something very general. And I think how you calculate the next question, and I'll Neil pitch to you, and please share about Black Consultants Group as well, because I know your time is limited because you have to leave us at 3. And we're going to be ending about 2:25, so we're going to end just a little bit early anyway. But how do you calculate price point, and also share how folks can get engaged with you?
Sure. Sure. So, calculating price point, like I said, I didn't have similar to you, Holly. I didn't have a political consulting mentor. Well, whether or not Renee wants to claim you as her mentee or not. Um, uh, I didn't have a Renee in my corner, but I'm glad but I'm glad Renee is in yours. And as far as price point is concerned, I would say talk to other folks in your space that have been receptive and helpful to your point just far. Think about the average cost, and usually depending on, for me, whether it's a statewide race, whether it's uh, or a state level race versus a federal race, that price point changes because obviously the federal races are going to be able to charge significantly more than you would
Mhm.
for a state level race. Um,
Mhm.
and you know, down ballot races are going to be um, less if you are thinking about, like, for instance, like a gubernatorial versus like a state legislator. You're going to probably charge your state legislator for your services less than you would the gubernatorial candidate or the state
Mhm.
attorney or or not a state attorney, attorney general, or and then even if you want to go more local, when we have off election years where we have mayoral candidates running, particularly in major cities across the country, um, you want to get into those areas like your St. Louis, like your Detroit, like your Chicago, like your
Mhm.
Washington D.C., like your Atlanta, Georgia, like your Savannah, Georgia, um,
Mhm.
like your Phoenix, Arizona. Um, so many cities across, and that I just rattled off a handful of cities. I know there's probably going to be people in the comments saying you missed mine, but the point I'm trying to make is when we are thinking about mayoral races, those as well are going to be that they're consider their budgets like you would a state ledge race, not necessarily like a gubernatorial or a federal. So you're not going to want to charge them a considerable amount. And also take into consideration that because their budgets are smaller, their manpower is going to be smaller as well. So
Mhm.
you're probably going to want to talk to them on a more consistent basis. I have a friend who back in 2017 had a number of black mayoral candidates that they were doing GC work for at the same time in several areas, and she was able to accomplish that because she was offering the same price point for each race, despite the fact that the propensity of the cities and the demographic size was going to be different. She still took into consideration that these are all first time candidates running for mayor. So you have to
Mhm.
consider that as well. Even when you are looking at your federal candidates, particularly at the congressional level, at the House level, that are first time candidates, there are going to be several of those in this cycle in 2022. If you aren't already um, uh, for me offering GC services, for instance, it's going to be very difficult for me to unless I'm already had been talking to several of these campaigns last year. Their GC is already hired, so it's going to be very hard pressed for the work that I do to get embedded into a campaign that is already established versus some folks who are doing DEI or mentoring or fundraising. Those services and even opposition research
Mhm.
are going to be needed to be added to the kitchen cabinet later on down the line. But
Yeah.
those opportunities are going to be able to provide you an opportunity to think about and range how wide of a net you want to cast. And also, and I'll end with this because I do have to jump. I did put my in the I do hope our technician is going to be able to send my contact information to the folks who are attending. Um, uh, I know we can't post it so folks can see it live. My email address is ncarter@newviewconsulting.org, and it's NUVIEW consulting, all one word, .org, and it's ncarter@newviewconsulting.org. So yeah, if you want to email me later on, please do. Thank you, Holly, for giving me the opportunity to speak to folks today. Thank
Thank
you, Renee.
you.
Thank you, Renee. It's good. Uh, It's great to see you again, Renee. I'll be it virtually, but it's still great to see you nevertheless.
Yeah. Thank you, Neil. And thank you for being a part of our conversation. You definitely added value to the space. Renee and I will hold it down. We know part of being a consultant is you got to take care of your clients too. So we appreciate you taking time in your busy day to stop by
Of course.
and add value.
Of course. Of course. Thank you for
All
having me.
right. Uh-huh. Absolutely. Well, Renee, I gotta give you a chance to weigh in on price point because you were the one to teach me about the necessity and the importance of valuing your services. So, gotta let you weigh in on this one.
I hope my mic is working better now. I can't hear you though.
It was doing so well. I don't know what happened.
Then it's tired.
Technology is not our friend.
No.
I want you all to know that Renee is absolutely brilliant on this subject of price and value for our services. So I hope, please, can you just please just offer a little bit and we'll just try to be patient with the sound. We are working on it, but it's actually to me worth hearing even with the feedback. So Renee, please.
Let me try. Is this better?
Yes, that's wonderful. Let's get the price stuff in quick before the gremlins come back.
All right, couple of things. If you call Redwood Enterprise, you'll get Redwood Enterprise, no cash, no conversation. Okay, because we have value, right? I always say to Holly, if we're the only people in the room that's not getting paid for our time and our services, then we probably are in the wrong place. Recognizing your time is worth something, what you have to offer has value. Critical pieces, again, even just having basic structural, I'm always going to go back to structuring, right? Have a sense of what your budget is. What do you need as an individual, even if you're not a company? What do you need to live a comfortable life? We need to stop scringing and scrunging at the margins. We know we are marginalized as people of color, women of color, right? We know we're marginalized, but we also need to make sure we recognize our fair market share. If we don't drive it, no one else is going to drive it for us. So let's start out with that. So part of this is be aware of what others in the same field that you are in are charging. Ask, right? B, everything that Neil said is critical because you don't want to underprice yourself or B, overprice yourself. So what will the market bear? What is the budgets of these campaigns? What are the budgets of some of the allied organizations?
Yeah.
And then figure out that is an element that you can actually get.
And on that specific piece, I encourage people to pull financial disclosures. You want to know what people are getting paid, pull their past financial disclosures on some of these races and see what those expense line items are for consultants.
Yeah.
That's one of the beautiful things. It does take a little research, but it's worth it to know if you're actually hitting your market price.
Because then you've removed one of the barriers, right? For you to know whether is this well worth your time given what you want to offer and can offer, right? Because it's got to be a decision you make. I'd say the next area would be, frankly, to look at the full universe of other consultants to which your work can supplement. And again, I'm getting back into this collaborative business model, price point. There's a lot of projects. One of the things Holli and I routinely do is that we look at kind of what's on her plate, what's on my plate, right? Do we have capacity? You notice the word we have capacity and talent, other collaborating partners that can meet the need of a possible opportunity. So we believe that every opportunity we hear about, we know somebody. So that's part of how we operate. It's that, and let me just enter that. Part of it is that we all have shared values. I can't stress that enough, We have shared values on how we operate in this world and how our businesses operate.
So one of the things that I want to do, I'm gonna turn the conversation a little bit to speak specifically about the parties. Renee and I, the type of consultant that we're currently doing is less campaign-ish and more working with the parties actually to be more cognizant of how they represent inclusion. And a big way that they represent inclusion is by hiring vendors. So we're working more from the inside out as inside consultants with several party committees and other progressive organizations to help them get better about hiring consultants of color like you. So one of the things that I definitely wanted to do as we close out the last few minutes, and please continue to put your questions in the chat. We'll continue to answer them. But give a little perspective on how consultants of colors can put their best foot forward to be competitive, to take advantage of these expanding opportunities. What are some of those tips? And I know we actually had some conversations with a few of our clients to get tips directly from them as well. So, what are some of those things?
Number one, everything we said today on being structured. Again, some of the basics, people, right? Number one, make sure that when you submit your capabilities, what I would call a capability statement, you need to be able to say what you're doing, right? Put it on one page. It should be reflective of what services you're offering, right? Get it to your networks. Get it to the appropriate contacts or whatever contact you may have within the party structure and ask them to move it to the appropriate person who can make decisions. You got to be specific with your ask, right? Sending it to me is not going to probably be very helpful because I'm not making the decision about that. Right? So it's appropriate to think through. Again, part of this is just thinking through and putting in place your plan of action. It's not just on a whim. It really is really thinking through what are the steps that are needed for me to secure the end goal, which is a contract. How do I present myself? What is my brand? What is my price point? And who am I connecting with?
I love all of that. And the other thing that I would add here, and I'm looking at your question in particular, Francis, is really be clear about what makes you different. Understand the unique value proposition that you bring, either on behalf of yourself and when you're working with candidates. Listen, if I'm gonna take Congress because we do a lot with the DCCC. Congress is a mere 5 seats away in their majority. So they're looking for opportunities not just to sustain, but to expand. And many of those folks are more likely to be your clients than the incumbents, if we're being honest about it. Because the incumbents are going to be tend to want to work with the people who they currently have relationships with. So where you have the opportunity to build, or the highest opportunity, I'm not going to say you have no opportunity with incumbents, but the highest opportunity is in these expansion candidates and in candidates who are coming from outside the party who don't have the infrastructure. They are looking for you. So you should be looking for them and present yourself to them. They don't have a clue. So I think that is really, really important. And when you can be really clear about what that value add is, what that unique value that you can do or that you understand, and particularly in California, listen, they're all Democrats, so it feels like there's just Democrats. I won't say they're all Democrats, but there's a lot of Democrats in California. It's perceived to be a blue state. But what do you understand about the state that's different? What have you unlocked? What skill set and value do you add to campaigns that you do well and that you feel like you can do better than other people? Leaning into that is critical. Being able to express that, being able to show a track record if you have it, is super, super, super important. And yes, relationships matter, but there's all kinds of ways to build them. The other thing that I would say on this, Renee, honestly, is um, listen, figure out how you help move the needle. Folks, we're out here trying, if you're looking at party stuff, the party is about trying to win. We know that part of winning is living values, and part of living values is being inclusive, which creates the opportunity for you. While we are certainly pushing for there to be more and more opportunities that are more fairly presented, like through an RFP process or through some type of competitive bid, let's be clear, some of that is not possible. And it's not possible because we don't want to signal to the right that we're looking for certain services, and we don't want to give away strategy. And so some of these contracts are going to be based on relationships, and the way that you build relationships is doing stuff like this, showing up to things Empowering Blue, showing up to their conferences, being a part of their fundraising apparatus. I promise you, if you bringing in some big donors, you're going to get folks' attentions and create relationships. Figure out ways that you can add value. I'm not one. I also do a lot of advice giving and a lot of just tips and tricks. But I stop at the point I say, I'm going to give you as much advice as I would before I get paid. In other words, I give the kind of advice that leads to you wanting to hire me. So do that.
I'll have to take that one from you. So now you want me.
You're going to take that one from me? Yeah. I learned that from you. I learned that from watching you. Because a lot of times you think you're giving people the answer. You're not. You're giving them the path. But the reality is that because they don't have your expertise and skill, they can't execute that path without you. They can't execute that path without you. They still gonna need you, and it's okay. And the other thing, which is kind of my pet peeve, is consultants help each other. Renee said it in terms of a high level function, in terms of helping each other collaboratively and joint venturing on projects and sharing capacity, but help each other out by letting each other know about opportunities. I don't do communications. It doesn't take anything for me to share that my client is looking for a communication person. Help be a part of the ecosystem that helps to build relationships with other consultants that when you get a contract, introduce I sometimes have a contract and I say, hey, Renee, do you know so and so? Because I think they might be interested in what you're doing. I've talked to Neil. I have a lot of people now who are coming who are creatives. I'm not as creative, but I do a little event stuff. I bring those creative forces to bear and say, hey, do you know about so and so who has this creative firm? So you can also be a part of creating your own network. What were you going to say, Renee?
I was going to just say amen.
Thank you. I was just going to say, how do you convert? One of the questions is, how do you convert some of the people asking you for advice into paying clients? I know what Renee's going to say. Listen, you let folks know from the beginning that you're in business, that you're a small business run by a person of color or a veteran or a woman or whatever you are. And you say, I'm happy to provide you this advice. If you need further help, I'm happy to provide you with a proposal or a cost sheet. We can't be afraid to establish ourselves as business people. And I think this also goes back to what you were saying earlier, Renee, about you got to be in business. And when people start to see you as a business and not just a personality or an individual, then they treat you like a business.
It creates a very different relationship and expectation. And the first expectation is of yourself or your business, right? We go into conversations, we listen, because sometimes what I have to offer isn't really what they need. Other times what they're telling us they need isn't really what it is, and they might be prepared to have to tell you that's not really what you need. And so that it's an evaluation both ways in the equation. And again, know your worth, right? Make sure you ask.
Absolutely, know your worth. That's so critical. And Francis, I want to give a shout out to you to modeling great networking behavior in the chat. You can do it all kinds of ways, by introducing us to some of the candidates. I assume that these are people that you're working with. Oh, yes, phenomenal clients. Absolutely. Opportunity everywhere. And listen, this is how we learn about other things that are happening in other places. So thank you so much for modeling that. Please, if you're not looking at the chat, please take a look at the fantastic candidates that Francis has introduced to us in the chat. This is another way that you can also use your business as a way, as an extension of your values, by using your values to help pick your clients. And we haven't talked about that as much, but I would say for me, that actually became very crucial. Um, I kind of got to the point, and at first, I was that client, I was that consultant who I had a lot of different skills. And I felt like, you know what? I know how to fundraise. I know how to run field campaign. I've done just enough communications to be dangerous. I can do it all. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do everything. And I had so many contracts going in so many different directions. I was a freaking crazy person. And yes, I managed to get it all done. And yes, I had a measure of success, but at the end of it, I was a dish rag. And what has become more sustainable for me is when I've been able to really focus in on what my passion is. And for me, my passion is really about organizations and institutions, and creating good systems and good organizations for progressives, so that not just the voters have a good experience, but the people who are stakeholders in those organizations have a good experience, and particularly people of color. And so that's how I ended up doing the work that I do now. I used to do a lot of government work. I don't do government work anymore because government ain't my people, really. My people are the people who help to put people in office, who help to change the world, progressives and Democrats. And so now that makes up most of my client base. And at first, I thought I would be losing out by doing that. But I'm going to tell you, I am just as successful, and in some cases, even more successful now that I have really honed in, because now people are more. And I'll tell you where it really went up is in the referrals. And so much of this business is about referrals. And so when I was able to be clear and articulate exactly what I do in a very succinct way, that allowed clients who wanted to refer me to people to be better referral agents for me. So I also encourage you to think about, for the clients that you do have, as a way to expand your business, work with them to be your biggest promoters. If you did a good job for them, help them spread the word. There's no better endorsement than a former client or even a current client who says, this consultant is adding value to me, and I recommend that they could add the same value or similar value to your work. That is the quickest way, even bigger than relationships, to really look at expanding your work. Renee, how have referrals worked for you? How important are referrals for you?
Repeat business, and referrals are a primary way we do not market. Period. And that speaks to, again, not overwhelming yourself with a million different things that you're doing, from grassroots organizing to communications to fundraising. Get clear, because whatever you're doing, you're doing a lot, and there's only 24 hours in the day, and you need to use that time that you are with your client, for your client, and delivering quality. Because the best way to be out of business is to have poor production and delivery. And I think in terms of delivery. What am I being paid for, and the quality of that product.
I just want to repeat what you said to make sure people understand. I want to just repeat what you were just saying because I want to make sure people got that. The quality of your work is important. It is a part of your brand, and when you show up in excellence, people want to spread the word. Especially now at the end of the year when I'm ending several of my contracts, I got more folks now trying to reach out to me because the folks that I'm ending contracts with are happy with the work that I've done for them, and they can't wait to spread the good news. I'm gonna tell you, they say bad news spreads fast, but good news spreads faster. And so I just encourage you all, and we're going to close out in a few minutes, I'm going to give Renee some parting words as well. But definitely want to emphasize this point of do your work well, because that is your greatest calling card. And enable the clients that you do have, the relationships that you do have, empower them to be a referral service for you. That's not only a great way to build relationships, it's a direct pathway to business. And that's what we want you to do. We hope that the things you've heard today are really concrete things that you can do. Renee, final thoughts about words of wisdom for consultants and how they can grow their businesses.
Give gratitude. Give gratitude. It is a value and a practice. So first I want to thank everyone for their time. And apologize for the inability to fully hear. That's so out of my span of control. But want to thank you for your time, your talents, your interests, your commitment to the values of the Democratic Party. Our challenge now is to make sure that we actually believe that. And also thank you. So thank you.
And I want to thank Renee, and I want to thank all of you for your time and attention. We put this together because we really wanted to empower everyone who would watch this either now, either live or later, to be able to walk away with some good tips that would really help to grow and empower your businesses. This is such an opportunity. I'm gonna tell you, I represent about 10, nope, 12 different clients right now, which is a big load, all in the progressive space or representing the Democratic committees. Every single one of them, from the Democratic committees to all of the various progressive organizations that I work with and businesses, every single one of them is interested in expanding their relationship with consultants of color. Renee and I mentioned that we work with a network of other consultants, and all of their clients too are asking us every day, how can we reach out to, and how can we collaborate, and how can we create partnerships with consultants of color? So, unlike any other time, we felt like doing a workshop like this and having this fireside chat was important to highlight the amount of opportunity. But the amount of opportunity is only as good as our ability to take advantage of it and to capitalize of it. So the other side is we wanted to have kind of a real talk conversation about some of the things that are preventing consultants of color from closing the deal. So out of this, we hope you've learned a few things. First and foremost, definitely present yourself in a professional and business way. Make sure that your paperwork is in order. I know that sounds very basic, but it is very important. Those things are things that can hem up a business being able to be in business with you. Think about some of the business things, not just about, like for instance, making sure that you can get paid because you have a good EIN number, that you have a bank account that's readily accessible for direct deposits or electronic payments. You have a way to take, most of the world now, about half of the world, you may get paid via credit card. So you need to be able to accept credit card payments and other electronic payments. Some companies will require you to have insurance of some kind, even if it's general liability insurance. So make sure you're looking at these kinds of things. All of these kinds of things are the business stuff that you need to be in business. And the more The bigger your budget is outside of campaigns, and this is dealing with institutions, like you want a contract with the Democratic Campaign Committee, they need you to be a business, because bigger than just the services that you're going to provide, if you're not a business and something goes wrong, they're going to get the hit for that, not you as your business. So they got to think about these things. So be a business, be professional, show up as a business. Um, Understand your value and your worth. We heard that. Make sure that you're clear about what value you're bringing to the market. Um, think about your price. As Renee said, know your worth. Know your worth. Know your worth. I'm going to do a little cheer on that one. Know your worth so that your price is competitive in the market, and that you are being valued at a level that is appropriate. We're not in business to starve. We're in business to be prosperous. So you got to know your worth. Neil spoke a little bit about connecting with folks. Make sure you're connecting with other consultants. We help each other out. If not for each other helping each other, we wouldn't be getting anywhere. So definitely encourage you to reach out to networks, organizations, associations, each other, as Francis has modeled in the chat. And William, thank you so much for coming with the great questions today. This is the way we get better, is when we help each other out. And I would say take an opportunity to learn and grow. Be invested in your craft. I spend a lot of time learning and making sure that I'm on the cutting edge of not just research and information and polling, but technology and the different ways in which my industry and the work that I do is evolving, because your clients are looking for you to be an expert and bring the expertise. And with that, I would also like to end as Renee did, in absolute gratitude. Thank you so much for being a part of today's session. I believe it will be available on replay. Apologies for some of the technology, but please know that Renee is an absolute asset in this movement. There's so much. I would not be here, and certainly would not be as successful as I am if not for the friendship, partnership, and mentorship of Renee Redwood. I am very grateful to her. I wish you all to have a Renee like person in your life, and know that if you work at it, you can be successful. There is not a scarcity of opportunity out here. And if you do what you need to do in your business, you will be successful, you will prosper, and you can prosper living your values and up and being a support and value to the progressive movement. I'm available on LinkedIn. You can look me up, Holli Holliday. Feel free to reach out to me. And I just want to say thank you and good. And that'll be the end of our session. We'll stay on for a second or so more, just to say thank you.
Thank you.